Is that your best shot? Is that your best shot?
All right, well, this morning will be review and consolidation. I don't anticipate saying anything new that you haven't already heard. We started out this lesson, a series of lessons, with the idea that we would be coming to a deeper understanding of salvation, what salvation is. I think that that's what we want to address this morning. What is salvation based on what we have been learning from 1 Peter and from the Liber Graduum? How do we know, how do we understand salvation? Let's see here. Let's do this. Let's look again at the structure of the church's liturgical worship, because I think that this not only tells us what salvation is, I think it is what saves us. Okay, let me find my pen here. All right. So, we came into a great Lent, beginning with the Sunday of the prodigal, or excuse me, the Sunday of the publican and the Pharisee. You heard me describing those Sundays coming into Great Lent as alternating between Sunday of Judgment, Sunday of Forgiveness, Sunday of Judgment, Sunday of Forgiveness. So judgment, forgiveness are the steps by which we come into Great Lent. So that the indication to me is that when we come into Great Lent, we're coming visibly in time, of course, to, well, this year, what was it? What was the beginning of Great Lent? March 1st, was it? March 2nd?
Second was a Monday, so it had to have been.
So it was March 2nd. We came into Lent in time on March 2nd, visibly. But remember, there is the visible opens onto the invisible of the heart. So invisibly, we can see, I think, where we were coming in the lectionary of the church. And in the lectionary of the church, we came on Tuesday of Cheese Fair Tuesday, which would be the Tuesday before the beginning of Great Lent. We read the story of Christ's trial. Then on Cheese Fair Wednesday, we read from the prophet of Joel. And the theme there was judgment. The valley of judgment. And the terrible day of the Lord, which says, Joel, is a day of darkness, not a day of light. Now, we're reading this, together, so that one is explaining the other. So one notes how, while in the lectionary, as it were, in time, at a particular time of the world history, whenever it was, 33 AD, sometime around the month of Nisan, I believe it was, in June. The Lord is being tried. God is being subjected. So this is not just Christ. This is God, the God of Israel, who is being subjected to judgment by Israel. So his own people are judging God. They're judging their king, their Lord, which gives oomph to the cry of the people at the crucifixion, at the trial. We have no king but Caesar. They rejected God. So here, God is being judged by Israel. So you might say that this is taking place on the visible plane. And is it not true that on the visible plane, the world is judging God? Right? Why all the evil in the world? Where's God? So God is being blamed for all the evil in the world. That's called in psychology blame shifting. But on the invisible plane, we're taken to the invisible plane by the prophet Joel. And here it is God who's judging Israel and the nations. So, looking at that, we begin to understand that as we're drawing near to Great Lent, drawing near this year to March 2nd, 2020, in time, we're actually also at the same time entering into this mystical or invisible or hidden reality in which beneath our judgment of God, our rejection of God, our condemnation of God, God is judging us. We are being judged. And so the church is inviting us. She's showing us. She's opening the door to show us and bring us beneath the surface of the visible and into the invisible realm of our heart, where God is judging me. I think that's powerful because, for example, you come to confession and maybe you've been mad at God, but you come to confession, you might still be mad at God, but it seems that when you come to confession, you suddenly get a sense that I need to cut back on my condemnation of God here. I need to, there's a feeling that in my judging of God, somehow I'm wrong. There's a feeling that, in fact, deeper than that, God is judging me. And so the church is inviting us to come into Great Lent in the understanding, in the fear. She's inviting us to come into the Great Lent in the fear of God, that he's judging me. So we have, again, there's also this, that all of this is taken, so Christ is being tried, the world is judging God, but beneath that, God is judging the world. And Joel talks about the judgment seat of God. He sits on his judgment seat. So then on Thursday, Cheese Fair Thursday, we read of the crucifixion. And Christ, he's not sitting, but he's standing, which is standing on the cross. And it would appear from this that what the church is showing us, that the judgment seat on which we are being judged is the cross, in which Christ is subjecting himself to our judgment. And it is the cross that judges us. We are being judged by the cross. We are being judged by a God who himself has allowed himself to be judged. So we come into now we're coming into Great Lent. That fear of God, terror of God, I don't know that it lessens, but I think it changes its color. Now the fear is the fear of the terrible mercy of God. And there's a fear that one feels when one comes into this mercy of God, but it's a fear that it's the fear not of God anymore, let's say. It's the fear of what's going to happen if I reject God. So in other words, the fear changes. That's what I think I'm trying to say. I'm not afraid of God. I'm afraid of the consequences of my turning away from God. And I find I don't want to turn away from God. At the same time, I find that there's something in me that resists the mercy of God. And there's something deeper than that doesn't resist the mercy, but there's something that longs for the mercy of God. Yes,
But it almost creates a helplessness.
Okay,
I
yeah.
want to say that.
Yes,
like I can't do good.
Exactly. Yes. So it's like, so what you just said then brings us back to the prodigal son. It's like, he comes to his senses. He comes to himself. He comes to his senses. And he realizes he has squandered everything. There's nothing good that he can offer to the Lord. And now he's afraid of being separated from God. That's what he's afraid of. So, in that fear now, this fear in which has changed his quality, in which I'm now afraid of being separated from God. I don't want to be separated from God, but why would God want to have anything to do with me? Who am I even to cry out to God? It's like the crying out to God even just dies on your lips because you're so, you see that you are the sinner. And so then we come to the Cheese Fair Friday, where we read from Zechariah. And there, the general theme is forgiveness. This becomes especially powerful. This passage that we're reading on Cheese Fair Friday from Zechariah becomes extremely powerful and even opens up when you read it in front of the tomb of the Lord. Because on Thursday I said the crucifixion and cross, but this also takes us to the burial of the Lord. It takes us to Luke 23:54, which you all know by now, because I've quoted it a number of times. The day of preparation, and the light of the Sabbath already beginning to dawn. This is the light of the resurrection, which is already beginning. This morning's gospel, which is the uncovering of the roof by the 4 men to let the paralytic down into the house. I'll make a note of it in the sermon that this looks an awful lot like an icon of the myrrh bearers drawing near to the tomb. And like the 4 men uncover the roof, the angels roll the stone away. The paralytic is let down into the house of where the Lord is, and he receives the forgiveness of his sins. The myrrh bearers come to the tomb, the stone is rolled away, and they come into the fear, the terror of the resurrection. So that, putting all of this together, it's like the church is showing to us again. Here the church is teaching us again. This beautiful sermon that the church is preaching to us in these days of Lent. How the light that is streaming forth from the tomb of the Lord is the light of resurrection and forgiveness. The beauty of this is that if we receive and accept the judgment of God on the cross, instead of leading to our condemnation, that judgment brings us to our healing. The healing of forgiveness, the resurrection to eternal life. And this then is, this if you will, this is this union between resurrection, forgiveness, between judgment, mercy, receiving the judgment of God, accepting the truth. You know, that's the beauty of it, that's the irony of it. God is truth. So if I accept his judgment, if I receive it and accept it, that I am a sinner, the first of all sinners, I'm accepting the truth about myself. So when I accept the truth, I'm accepting God. And all of those elements that are shown to be held together by the cross of Christ is confirmed by this on Cheese Fair Friday, the prophecy from Zechariah, when the prophecies about forgiveness, so that you read Zechariah in the light of Luke 23:54, you understand that the forgiveness is the light of resurrection. Joel says he says that the day of the Lord is terrible. It's a day of darkness, not of light. Okay, and he also says that the sun is dark. The sun will be darkened. So you now read the story of the Lord's crucifixion. It says the sun was darkened, and yet here in the dead of when the sun has set, when the sun is darkened, but on Friday evening when the sun has set anyway. But it's like the sun has ceased to function because it's been darkened. That means that the light of the skies the lights of the sky don't work anymore. And yet here's this light coming out from the tomb of the Lord, which is, it's hidden. You don't see it in your translations. It says the Sabbath was drawing near, or something like that. Or I don't remember exactly what the translations say, but the verb, as I've told you, is the verb for dawning. Not your mom, but D-A-W-N, the morning light. So that while the sun and the lights of the sky have failed, here we are, as it was on the first day of creation, when God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. That light obviously was a created light, because it says, "Let there be," so it's created. It's the light of Torah, is what it is, the light of the law. The light of God's law. But here is the uncreated light that was shining inside the created light of creation, shining inside of that. Now it's like this uncreated light of God himself is coming out, from the tomb. So this is what we are coming into. All of this is what we're coming into when we come to Great Lent on March 2nd, 2020. In time, we're coming to Monday morning, March 2nd. But this is the visible court of the church, and the visible court of the heart. This is what's going on. This is what we're entering into. And I think that we all feel it. Even though we don't understand it, we all feel it, because when Great Lent comes, Sunday evening, the forgiveness vespers, we change the colors to purple. You can feel it. Everybody can feel it. The winds have shifted. There's a different quality that you can't put your finger on. There's a different quality just to everything. So this is what we come to Great Lent. This is the mystery that we come into Great Lent. However, this is what I want to point out here, that as of yet, you notice, in terms of the invisible church of the heart, we are not yet, we're not necessarily in our heart yet. We are with the myrrh bearers. We are with them in front of the tomb. We're not in the tomb. We're in front of the tomb. So we come into Great Lent, and we're at the tomb. And then it says that the myrrh bearers went, in the English it says that the myrrh bearers turned. Is that 54? I can't remember. Whatever. I think this is verse 54. The light was beginning to dawn, and I think the myrrh bearers is verse 57. Whatever. You know what I'm saying. The myrrh bearers turned, but the Greek verb has them. It's interesting to me. Here's another interesting note, that in the prophecy of Joel, there's this verb to turn several times. In the Greek Septuagint, it's strepho. It's several times in the prophecy of Joel. I don't know if there's anything to make of this or not. It has the preposition though, epi, which means to turn upon, turn toward, I suppose. Now, in Luke, when he says that the myrrh-bearers turned, he uses the same verb. But instead of using this preposition, or this prefix, he uses, which is a preposition, on, upon, or to, he uses this preposition, which is hupa. Or in English, let's put it in English, hypo. Yeah, hypo, which means down or under. So, the myrrh-bearers, they turn, but they don't turn toward anything necessarily. They turn downward. So when you're trying to put this into English, to make sense of it, if you're, you read it as a muggle, and so as a muggle, you're completely on the visible plane, you're on the external plane, you don't know what to do with it. So to make sense of it, you might translate it as they turn back. That's kind of its ordinary, everyday meaning. But when you're reading this theologically, in the mystery of Christ's Holy Pascha, these kind of little idiosyncrasies jump out at you. You don't just pass over them. And you wonder, is there a reason that St. Luke, is St. Luke, does he have Joel's prophecy in mind when he's writing this? And if he does, why doesn't he say epistrepho? Why does he say hypostrepho? Might he be saying something theological? I have no way to prove this. The only thing that we have to in which to make some kind of a judgment on this is to read it in the context of the church's worship. And in the context of the church's worship, this strikes out as saying that, as I have suggested, that it means that they turned inward. They turned inward. And then it says in the next verse that they rested. But it uses again, the verb that's used for rest is the verb for prayer, as it came to be used in the church's history, running out of room here. And I don't necessarily want to erase all this. It's hesychasm, which means stillness. So instead of saying that they rested because it was the Sabbath, it'd be better to translate it as they became still on the Sabbath. Because there's another verb that you would use if you wanted to say rested. It's like it's some form of pauo, the anapauo or avocatapauo. This is how you would normally say rest. So why is St. Luke saying this? That they grew still on the Sabbath. And again, you look at this in light of all of this. Christ is crucified on Good and Holy Friday. He's buried in the tomb on Great and Holy Saturday morning, which is Great and Holy Friday evening for us. So the sun is dark. So we're in the Sabbath when the myrrh-bearers turn and go down and go inward. We're in the Sabbath. Again, which Sabbath? If you're a muggle, you're going to think the seventh day of the week, Saturday, another Saturday. But the church teaches us to read it theologically. When we come to, is it Great Holy Saturday afternoon, Barbs? Not Great Holy Friday evening, right?
That what?
This is the mystical Sabbath.
It's Friday night.
We sing that on Friday night. Mm-hmm. On Friday night, the beginning of Great Holy Sabbath, we are standing in front of the tomb. So you see, in terms of the visible church of the heart, we haven't moved 1 iota, 1 inch. We have not moved 1 inch from the beginning of Great Lent. We started Great Lent at the beginning of in the front of the tomb. We end Great Lent. we end Holy Week. We end Holy Week in front of the tomb on Great and Holy Friday evening. And we hear the church, and we're so, because remember, on Great and Holy Friday evening, by that time, the tomb is in the middle of the nave. And we brought the epitaphio, the shroud that has the icon of Christ's corpse on it. We have brought it and we have laid it there on the tomb. So now in the nave, we are standing at the tomb. And it's now that we hear the church singing to us, this is the mystical Sabbath on which that Moses was talking about. Whatever the words are to that hymn, I never can remember them offhand, but that's the gist of it. This is the mystical Sabbath that Moses was talking about. This Sabbath. So the Sabbath that the myrrh bearers are in, and that is the same Sabbath that we're in, invisibly, in the mystical, invisible church of the heart. We're in the mystical Sabbath of God's rest, his death on the cross, and his rest in the tomb. But we're in the visible plane of the heart, the invisible court of the heart. So given everything that the church is telling us and showing to us, we understand that the tomb is in the visible court. But the invisible court of the tomb is our own heart. So here we are at the end of Great Lent, or at the end of Holy Week, right where we began Great Lent. And now things begin to change. Because that particular service on Great and Holy Friday evening, which is the matins for Great and Holy Saturday, is called Lamentations and Praises. The lamentations of the Theotokos and the praises of the Theotokos. And you remember that at the end of that matin service, on Great and Holy Friday evening, you start singing the great doxology, and when we get to the Trisagion, that's when you take up the epitaphios and we begin to process. The priest leads the faithful. We go outside, process around the church 2 times, come back in. The epitaphion is held above people's heads, and the faithful file back into the nave under the shroud. Then we bring the shroud and we place it on the tomb. So, I've always thought, but I was kind of afraid to say it till I had confirmation. And then I was pleased when Father Jonathan Proctor gave his sermon last year, one of the Lenten Sundays when we were at St. George, wherever it was. I think it was St. George Antiochian. And he affirmed that we are going inside the tomb. So when we come back in on Great Holy Friday evening, now we're in the tomb. We're not at it anymore. We're inside of it. So do you see that how the liturgical structure of the church is the shape of this inner exodus of the gospel, in which we are making a journey from the visible to the invisible, so that by the time we come to Great and Holy Saturday afternoon, which is now the evening of Great and Holy of the Sabbath, we are we're in the nave, in front of this structure that we call the tomb, but invisibly, we are in the tomb of the Lord, which is the tomb of our heart. And then so then after we have come back in on Great and Holy Friday evening, and the shroud has been placed on the tomb, so now we're inside the tomb. We're not at it anymore. We're inside it. So we're inside the mystical reality of the heart. Now is when generally, traditionally, historically, Daniel reads from Ezekiel 37, 1 through 14, whatever it is. This is the vision of the valley of the dry bones. And we come to verse 12, And we hear the Lord saying to Ezekiel, for I will raise you, I will open your graves, I will raise you from your tombs, and I will lead you into the land of Israel. And you will know that I am the Lord your God. But the land is also of theological meaning. It's the inheritance of Israel, but it is also the inheritance of God. And you hear the land, or you see the land oftentimes as an emblem of the people of Israel, and the inheritance of God is said to be Israel. He calls Israel his own inheritance. But then he says in several places to the prophets, he says to Israel, I am your inheritance. Especially to the Levites, the priests. I am your inheritance. You have no portion in the land because I am your inheritance. Well, you know, the church is the kingdom of priests. We are the new Levites, you might say. Our inheritance is not a geographical plot on the globe. Our inheritance is God himself. And we are the inheritance of his Son. So when he says, I will bring you into the land of Israel, what he means is, I will bring you into your inheritance, which is me. The Lord is our inheritance. The Lord is the land in whom we will live. And then we go home with that prophecy ringing in our ears, and then we come back and do a Holy Saturday afternoon, and then Pascha night. And again on Pascha night, we process 3 times around the church. So what do you think is the theology of that? Visibly, we're going around the church 3 times. So an uncle comes to visit us and he says, why do you keep going around the church all the time? You go around the church 3 times, you end up right where you started. Why? What's the point? Well, we should be able to answer their question. Based on Ezekiel 37, 1-14 that we read when we came back into the church on Friday night, what do you think we're doing on Pascha night when we go around the church? So Friday night we were coming back into the tomb. We're coming into the tomb. Well, now where are we going? What's the third court that's left that we haven't touched yet?
Kingdom of heaven.
The kingdom of heaven. So, you see how the liturgical structure of the church, we start with the visible, and through the visible, and all of these visible movements, we are engaging the invisible church of the heart, and then on Pascha night, we enter mystically into the kingdom of heaven, which is the mystery of God himself. And we dwell in the land, we dwell in God. God becomes the ground that we stand on. And I want you to see in that is an image of theosis, divinization, deification. Did some of you say that?
He said.
I guess
You were
it's
whispering, theosis. Exactly.
You know what, the other thing I love is that when you're out there after the gospel, when you pound on the doors, you do it the image of the cross.
Image of the cross, yes. What I love about this is that, there are those who would argue that theosis is not a biblical doctrine. Well, excuse me, the theosis is the very structure of the Bible. It's the very structure of the Bible. It's the very structure of the church's worship. It's not to be found in proof texts here and there. It is the mystery of the gospel. So then what is salvation? Salvation is salvation. Becoming one with God. I'm not one with God yet. I'm still one with my idols. So I'm still on an exodus. I'm still on the exodus, but that's the, that's the hope that as I take up the cross, which you understand, the cross. It's the instrument of death. However, that's the visible meaning of the cross. The invisible meaning of the cross is that it is the icon of God's love. It is by his cross that the cross is the supreme epiphany of God, the divine love of God. So when I take up my cross, I'm taking up the love of God. And if I'm taking up my cross, if the cross is the mystery of love, then when I take up my cross, I'm taking up my love for God, however small that might be. But even if my love for God is that big, if I take it up, God fills it. And as he fills it, that cross can grow. And as the cross grows, well, let's imagine my idolatrous heart as the tomb, the stone tomb, sealed by the stone of my idolatry. And if the tomb of my heart is getting bigger and bigger, what's going to happen to the stoniness of the heart? It's going to crack, right? It's going to start crumbling as the heart gets bigger and bigger and bigger, filled more and more with the divine love of the Lord. So this is the process of salvation, taking up the cross, the love of God, my love for God, joining my love, however small it is, to God's love. And by holding to that cross, going on this exodus into my heart, and if I just hang on to that cross, however small it might be, it will lead me into my heart, into the kingdom of heaven, and into union with God, and into my deification, in which now I can say with St. Paul, it is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. So salvation is an exodus, and its ultimate destination, its ultimate goal, is not just forgiveness. The Old Testament experienced forgiveness, the joy of forgiveness. But forgiveness itself points beyond itself. To be forgiven, you're not satisfied with being forgiven. Once you've been forgiven and you've experienced the love and the mercy of God, what do you want? Once you've kissed your sweetheart, what do you want? You're satisfied with just a kiss? No, you want to get married. You want to become one with your sweetheart. That's salvation. Salvation is getting married to God and consummating your love for God in the bridal chamber of your heart. And now you become go on with God, God becomes one with you. So let's end it there.
Yeah.
And let's get upstairs for a change.